So welcome to the panel, and I'm very happy that we've got four, four people across South Asia, and it really is a very South Asian representative panel. And while we've been chatting before, now it's time to really have a conversation and a more formal conversation. So here, we're all Sapanas, we all believe in the idea of South Asia, and I think all three of you have worked on four of you have worked on South Asia in different ways. And I'm hoping that everybody can talk about their experiences and really contribute to this conversation about creating a vocabulary for peace or framing a conversation around peace in a point of time where, whether it's social media or it's conventional media, peace is sort of a very distant, almost idealistic, almost an old-fashioned notion, really, like a fairy tale. And how do you really craft that in this space? So I wanted to start off with really asking Khushi to talk about peace and crafting for peace and creating a vocabulary for peace in Bangladesh. And we all know each other. We've all had conversations. And Khushi, can you really talk about trying to create a vocabulary for peace itself?
Thanks, Mandira. This is great to be in this panel with such wonderful people and good old friends of mine. Bangladesh, for many of us, especially in our generation, and even immediately after me, the generation, or 71 is plays a very important role. It's in our psyche. I am what I am because of 71. And 71, as you know, for us, it was a freedom struggle. It was violent, it was vicious, it was brutal, it was bloody. And we came out of that. We came out of that to create a new country. So it was very much inward looking in terms of what this country was and what it meant. And so that was something that was, the South Asianness was missing. And peace with what was called the enemy is Pakistan. I mean, I don't think till I started meeting, because of our South Asian networks that we were in, that I really began to understand, accept, and become real friends with Pakistanis. Now, how did we get to that? Because I know the first time I met somebody who was a Pakistani and I felt very close, etc. Somebody else said, I was at a conference and I said, shall I ask her to come along with us? And they said, no, not a Pakistani. I was imprisoned by the Pakistani during 71 and I was tortured. I'll never forget that. Now that person has moved away from that. So as looking at peace, and we look at peace even within the country, you see that as a country, so many years have passed, it's 53 years now. There is a lot of conflict within the country itself with different, whether it's class, definitely gender with women, with ethnicity, and with the Chittagong Hill tracts. So how do we bring in the language of peace, which is not compromised? And I think this is something that's a challenge. A lot of people think talking about peace is compromising, and it's not. It cannot be, and it is not. And I think this is where we need to talk about. Peace is not meaning just accepting everything and compromising. Peace is something beyond and something more, and reaching out and accepting. It's accepting all the differences, accepting different versions of history, accepting different positions that we have, and accepting that we need to stand up. It's not that accepting what is done on you or violence that is done on you or anything that is, aggressive that is done on you. It's not accepting it. It's accepting the values of humanity. And how do we do that? And I find that it's easier to work with women. I work with both women and men, that women understand it more. And I think because the women, and I hate stereotyping, but women do have the role of feeding and looking after the family. So having to provide during adverse situations makes them much more open to understanding the difficulties and then having to negotiate within that and even within their own lives. So, and then learning how to work together to create your own position and your own situation and your own status and without compromising. So I think peace is not compromising. Peace is not just accepting any injustice that is done to you. And I think
it's accepting different versions of history, and it's a wonderful point. And I want to ask Urvashi, who has Zuban, a publishing house, who's worked with this, but the other, whose seminal book, The Other Side of Silence, really looks at women's history in partition. And you've really you've talked about South Asia, you've looked at partition, you've looked at oral history, you've also looked at a different version of history of the conventional version of partition. But in this space at this particular time, we're looking at making peace with the enemy. Khushi talks about it with Bangladesh in respect to Bangladesh, right? But even within now, partition is made Pakistan the enemy, and we still continue to look at them as the other. Can you really talk about the idea of how do you look and craft peace, or you have a dialogue at this point of time with Pakistan as an enemy country, or seen as an enemy country, or seen as the other? Is there space for such conversations, for such dialogue?
Mandira, there's always space for such conversations and dialogue. And in fact, I want to go back to something you said in your introduction, where you said you spoke about peace being elusive and disappearing and a difficult idea to grasp. I actually don't think so. I think by and large, people in the world are peaceable and want to live peacefully. They just want to get on with their lives. And it is the battles and the geopolitics that play out around us that create the situations that make it seem as if ordinary people don't want peace. And I think they do. And I think one of the interesting things in South Asia has been the ways in which women have understood and acted on this. Khushi spoke of 1971 and the difficulties for Bangladeshi women to accept Pakistani women for a long time. And I remember that there was a time when I had two friends staying in my house, a Pakistani friend and a Bangladeshi friend, who previously had known each other and had not been friends, but they had known each other and they were perfectly cordial. But at that time, you could cut the tension with a knife because it was very soon after. But then 30 years later, there was a moment at a women's studies conference in Lahore when Pakistani women got together and they marked a whole day for their Bangladeshi sisters, and they offered to them the apology that the state was unwilling to give. And the whole day was made up of a conversation, which was a conversation of friendship. And I think that women in South Asia have used that. I don't mean it in an instrumental way, but I think that the networks of peace in South Asia among women and women's groups have been built on friendships. So there are ways in which we are all very deeply connected to each other. And I don't think we're unusual in that. When the doors opened up between India and Pakistan, for a while, and the path was shown by women, really, because when Asma Jahangir brought 50 or 100 women here in 2 busloads, and then a group of women went back, that opened up the door to people to realize that the desire to go across and see friends, old homes, old places, or just to see that the other place was not the horror you're making it out to be, but actually a normal place where normal people live. What started to happen was 100 human rights lawyers would apply for visa, 100 doctors would apply for visas, and our states were embarrassed into giving those visas because they couldn't refuse 100 people. So maybe 1 or 2 out of those 100 could not go, but that movement to me was a citizens movement for peace, and it actually convinced me, as did the work I did on partition, where there was such a deep desire on people's behalf to go across, see their old homes, and such deep ties of friendship. You know, despite all the violence, despite everything, there was that friendship across borders that retained. I mean, there were these two friends who wrote letters to each other across the border, which then the daughter-in-law discovered in a cupboard when her son was planning to come from Pakistan to India. And she was saying to him, don't go, don't go. She was a refugee from this side and saying to him, don't go, it's dangerous. And then she discovered the letters, and she couldn't believe that her father-in-law and had had a friend across the border. And that's when the son then came on a mission of peace. So I think it's these little stories that also tell us that there's a deep desire among people for peace. They don't want to be fighting. And, you know, hatred is not an emotion that you can, that survives or thrives unless you stoke it up all the time.
Yeah.
Peace is a condition that survives. You don't have to do anything for it. If you just live your life and let the other person live their life, there's peace. So in a sense, I think that's what we need to understand.
So Rakshanda, I wanted to bring this aspect to you. You know, she talks about lawyers going across, and you have really been at the heart of also sort of helping Indians on the other side. You've had this relationship where you've been part of the women's movement and helping Indians. Can you talk really about that?
Thank you. Thank you for connecting me again with my South Asians friends. You know, it was when I was the first time when I come across with the case, because I still remember a month ago when I met with Ashok Kumar. Ashok Kumar was an Indian and he was traveling Afghanistan via Pakistan, and without having visa, because in India, Pakistan, you need to have visa specification of cities. So he was in the prison, Peshawar prison, with three kids. So that case was not an easy case because Ashok Kumar was caught in Afghanistan border, and Afghanistan border is very sensitive area for Afghanistan and Pakistan. I met with him, and then I contacted Indian High Commission and I said, look, your citizen is caught in tribal area. So, you know, at that time, before 25th constitutional amendment, we had a black law which called FCR, Frontier Crime Regulation Act. And under Frontier Crime Regulation Act, if a Pakistani caught under that, so it was impossible to release. And Ashok Kumar was an Indian without visa. So the Indian embassy said, we won't get this consular access. So send him to the Rawalpindi prison. I sent there Ashok Kumar, and for 3 months Ashok Kumar was waiting there, and there was no support. Then again he contacted me from Rawalpindi, and then Ashok Kumar was brought back to Peshawar, and then there was India Pakistan convention in Peshawar. That was the last, yes, because I was part of Pakistan India Forum for Peace and Democracy, and I was also part of that bus. We travel via Volga with Asma Jangir and met with the other sisters. So, to cut story short, I fought for Ashok Kumar. So there was mixed reaction. First of all, because I was the first woman who appeared in the tribal court, because the tribal courts were not part of the regular court. So being a young lawyer, because hardly I was when I helped Ashok Kumar, so my practice period was hardly 3 to 4 years. So the judge was very amazed, a young woman for a Indian guy, and she's fighting this case. So luckily, at that time, I must acknowledge the judge and the political administration because those were managing tribal area. They helped me, and then we not only got release for Ashok Kumar, and Ashok Kumar was sent from Peshawar to Lahore to
Ah,
cross the Wagah border. And luckily, at that time, Nawaz Sharif and Vajpayee's discussion was, peace dialogue was,
ah,
so he was the 12th person. And by the time he crossed Wagah border, then again India and Pakistan situation get very conflicting. But the people, they said, why you supported an Indian? Our
mm,
people are dying in Indian prisons. Also, but that story was later on made as a case study to the
mm.
School of Kennedy, Boston School of Kennedy,
Wow.
because under Women Waging Peace, because the purpose was, if your countries are fighting, how you can maintain an individual human rights in your country, being a
Ah,
human right defender. Because when in 2014, when Rita Manchanda refer Ahmad Nihal Ansari case to me,
ah,
so I fought for him, because Hamid, when I took that case, nobody knows Hamid is alive or not.
yeah,
And
yeah,
the history of 75 years at that time, Hamid not only got free, but within the short time he crossed Wagah border.
mm,
So I still remember on 2018, 18 of December, when Hamid crossed Wagah border, lot of all the Indian channels,
ah,
they gave acknowledgement to me and my senior Qazi Muhammad Anwar as a lawyer, as a human right
yeah,
defender. But on the Twitter,
mm,
there was a Kashmiri boy, he cursed me and he said, I pray from the God, your parents should be killed with bombing, your children should killed with, because we are dying here and you are helping an Indian. So sometime when there is a conflict between the countries and you are still fighting for the human rights, I think for me this is a peace,
well,
because
that's
we acknowledge individuals' right. So I
yeah.
helped Kashmiri woman to go back to Kashmir.
Mm.
I helped Hamid Ansari and Ashok Kumar.
That's a fantastic story, and I want to. It really is. I want to ask Namrata. Namrata, you are a journalist, and like journalists, in some ways, as the old story goes, right? If a dog bites a man, it's not news. But if a man bites a dog, then it is. But in this age of sort of only bad news, and that's what happens with journalists. We only look. I mean, when you look at how many died, and then you decide where that story is placed on front page or not. How do you then find space for stories that are happy and not violent, especially at a point of time when outrage is the only way that you get hits? So how do you find space for peace in journalism? You have
Mike
to
is
unmute, G. Unmute,
Sorry, I
please.
was muted. Thank you, Mandira. It's such a pleasure to be here in this panel and listening to Khushi, um, Rakshanda, and Urvashi. One thought that was going in my mind, I'm going to answer from that perspective
Yeah.
before going to your question. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah, of course.
You know, uh, Nepal is completely different to the three countries that spoke before me.
Mm,
You came from one country,
mm,
and now there's such strong animosity, at least between two countries, India and
yeah.
Pakistan.
Mm,
Nepal has never been part of the India from where the other and three countries emerged, right? But it's been so interesting, and probably now, if you look at today's context, if any of us want to have a conference or seminar, a talk on human rights, even journalism, if Ravesh Kumar has to speak openly without fear, if Siddharth has to talk openly in the Press Freedom Day, we invite them over here to Nepal and they speak their mind out. And we have conferences on human rights. So it's become a ground where, the South Asians can meet freely and talk about human rights without the fear of having to be caught the next day.
I think it's
That is
also
which
the
is
only place
happening in one of the biggest and oldest democracies just next door, right? So, but still, if you look at the coverage of stories, stories on, like you were talking about, how do we find space for stories in the front page and openly in such a way that that gets priority? It doesn't happen. Negativity gets more priority, you see. And when I was listening to Khushi, Urvashi, and Rakshanda, I mean, such beautiful stories and experiences that you've brought. In Nepal, like that kind of animosity cross border or even within the country was not happening. See, when I grew up, like when Khushi talked the experience of 71, and then the animosity with Pakistan coming up and all that. As I was growing up, the only worries that conscious Nepalis had were the fight against the Ranas, right? And most of our political leaders, whether they were the Nepali Congress or the left aligned, actually grew when your independence movement was growing up in India, when India was one country. There were Nepalis who were studying and living in India because they were in fear of the Ranas and the Shah dynasty. They got the grooming together with the political parties that were brewing against the British, right? So that camaraderie was growing between the future Nepali leaders and the in Indian political parties. And later on, after the monarchy was thrown in Nepal, Nepal has always been a peaceful country, you see, with different religion. Nepal has majority Hindus and then the Buddhist, but there's never been tension between Buddhist and Indian. And when in 1990, after the restoration of democracy, that was the first time freedom of press was established and the private sector media was coming up, right? So I was a working journalist then. And one story I did out of interest was on the Muslims in Nepal then. So this was early 90s. And there were less than 4% Muslims then. And they said that they felt the safest in Nepal, which was the only Hindu country on earth, right? After restoration of 1990, it became a constitutional country. And then later it became a secular country. So even then, when it was the only Hindu nation on earth, the Muslims felt the safest in this country. So that gives a message of the peace value in Nepal, right? But with democracy, with freedom, and the establishment of secularism, and the advent of laws, Nepal didn't have a domestic violence law before then. Nepal didn't have a lot of laws, rights issues and all that. So after 1990, all these laws started being put in place. But still, I must say that the overall peace within the country, if you're not talking about the civil unrest that happened, the Maoist movement and all that, the harmony between different factions of the population was there. And the harmony with India was always there. But as the days are growing, you can see, like whenever I go to like initially, Nepal's education was managed by different universities in India, the Banaras Hindu University, the Lucknow University, and all these, right? My grandfather was the person who established the English department in BHU, Banaras Hindu University. So my mother's family grew up there, and I have a whole set of friends. And it's Nepal and Indians. Their homes are open to each other. But as the days are going by, now my friends have started asking me when I go to India, why do Nepalis hate Indians? Nepalis don't hate Indians, but Nepalis now openly raise the issue of land encroachment, or if sharing border resources, like the water. If Nepalis have to repair the dam in Khushi River, we have to get permission from India. Now the public starts questioning, and then it starts getting carried by the Indian media, which is so stronger and more powerful than us. And the kind of noise that comes out is not very peaceful language, you see. And that's creating a harmony where there was never fight between the countries. And unfortunately, a kind of animosity and feeling of big brother and encroachment is there. So that started over the years, and I'm sure you all have observed that. Now, I want to come right now to today's issue. As the election in India is happening, I was reading today article in the Guardian where in the UP area, there's a kind of, I don't know if it's open campaign or not, Mandira, you'll probably know it, of making UP a Hindu state. You see? Now, Nepal is coming out of the Hindu country status and really trying to establish secularism in such a way that this Eid, the Eid that just was completed, Nepal Telecom actually had a ringtone where there was a lovely music and a song on Eid Mubarak. And I actually felt so happy. And that reflected the fact that Nepal is really trying to integrate secularism. So there's a holiday in Eid, in both the Eids, Bakrid and, I'm sorry, I can't get the full name, but, there are two holidays in Eid functions in Nepal. There's a holiday in Christmas, and all these religions are around 4%, not more than that, you see. So while that is happening, the saffronization and also what's happening in UP in the election campaign is not having a positive impact across the bordering India and Nepal. And as soon as the Hindu fever rises across the border down south, the same philosophy starts increasing within Nepal streets, both in Kathmandu and in the Tarai belt, which borders India. So my worries is that, I don't know if I'm taking too many issues at the same time, but for me, I was never worried about peace in Nepal, frankly speaking, even when the Maoist movement was there. But now slowly that worry is coming because I believe in secularism and I believe in the federal republic system of Nepal. And to keep this intact, we need to have harmony among different religion, different communities. Social inclusion is needed there. And the role of women, when we come, is in all different factions, somehow, like Khushi earlier said, this keeping the family intact, keeping the movements intact is there, part of it. But how do we move forward and give space to the positive issues in the news? The one thing I'll mention to Mandira on journalism part is, just recently, there was a big conflict between a small group of Hindus and Muslims in a city called Birganj in Nepal. Now, it was clear, I went to find out the stories and all that. It is clear that there was a role the Indian BJP and the RSS had over there, you see. But somehow the media did not make the issue so big that it starts proliferating in other parts also. So I think when media looks into keeping peace a priority, you have to make sure that when there are conflicts which could lead to further conflicts between communities and religion, how do you make a way and prioritize issues of peace rather than war?
Okay, you're right. There is an aspect of looking at keeping tempers down, which social media doesn't do, and it expands it. But I wanted to touch on, take up some things that you all have touched upon. One is an aspect of peace as, waging peace, as Rakshanda ji said. Urvashi talked about the fact that the geopolitics is what interferes, and Namrata is saying the same thing, when geopolitics then comes in between individual relationships. And but before I get onto the India-Pakistan dynamic, which has sort of changed South Asia, and that is something that we can see even on this, and how we are sort of looking at it in how India, South Asia peace is sort of a hostage to the dynamics between these between these two countries. I wanted to talk to you really about the aspect of friendship. On friendship, sorry. On this panel itself, when part of Sapan, for example, was an idea of everybody coming across on a WhatsApp group and keeping it alive, keeping this dialogue alive. And there is, peace somehow, or secularism or diversity, it also comes down to individual acts. If you look at partition, you look at, for example, the 84, the riots. It is always about individual acts of kindness or individual acts of protection. And I wanted to ask you about how important, we talked about it, about friendship and women's friendship and solidarity, and how much of that within South Asia has been shaped, how much of that has helped keep the peace together, helped mobilize better conversations across the border, as well as how do you see this play out? Do you think this sort of offers hope for, say, conflict conditions between, say, what we're looking at, Israel and Palestine? Can we hope for women's solidarity, so to sort of show the way? Is that the way for peace? So can I ask Rakshanda ji first? You have a very interesting story about sneaking, about how women sneak across each other across the border. So about a friend. So could you talk about that, and could you talk about how women find their way and pave the way to peace?
You know, the women to women connection is very strong, and as earlier I mentioned, when we use the human rights language, or we think or we see things through our gender lens, so then our nationality just go behind everything, because we believe on sisterhood, or we believe on humanity. There are number of stories, because after having the first case of Ashok Kumar, and then in 2018 Hamid, there are some other stories as well. Because I still remember, we had a friend, she was visiting in Pakistan at that time, and we were traveling from Pakistan, different part of Pakistan, via Lahore, because at that time there was flight operation was working between India and Pakistan. And we were traveling, and we find our Indian friend, she had some problem with her visa and at the entry point. And we decided we will help her. And she was a bit nervous, and her host was also nervous. But we all activists, we were 5, 6 of us. We decided, and we were very confident we will manage. So there was a queue for uh, clearance, where you have to go through with the security clearance. So by the time when we ask her to present her passport, all of us, we start in our typical South Asian style, in a loud manner, the discussion. So our voices were so loud, the person on the security desk, he said, "Oh, you people are from NGO, you are human rights activists." We said, "Yes," and she's our friend. So when we were talking, and there was so much noise, and we were so involved with the person, The person didn't notice there is something he has to check. So we help her to cross the Indian Pakistani border to India. And in 2017, when I was traveling from Vaga to uh, Delhi for the book launch, because we were collecting women testimonies, and the Pakistani side, I was the author, and Indian side, Rita Manchinta was the author. So I was coming back from India to Pakistan. I didn't realize I can't have too much money
Yeah.
because there is a limit. And you won't believe the person on the security side in India, because they watch me live through my book launch, and Hamid case was in the media because Hamid was released after 1 year of that
Yeah.
visit to India. But on the airport, everyone they said, "We saw you on the TV. You are fighting for our prisoners." So they manage with all the money, and the guy was Sardar ji, and he said, इधर आओ ऐसको लो पैसे ले लो." So he, the way in his own language, he managed with all my money, and he said, "This time we help you. Next time won't come. You don't come. You need to come with too much money. We won't be able to help you." But even that time, that was a big breakthrough for me because I was alone. So I think that I realize, because sometime when you help someone, karma only return in some way where you don't expect. So I think I have both the experiences, helping people on the border side, and I received help not only in Amritsar, but few years back I get the support on the Mumbai airport, because on that airport I was caught. My entry exit point was Delhi, and I was taking flight from the Bombay, and that was basically, this is the connection. Main
Very
thing for me is fees is people to people interaction,
Yeah.
and sometimes people to people interaction is, I don't mean only with the civil society. There are people in the government sector, there are people on the border area. They are very cordial with each other. The only thing is dividing us is rising religious extremism, because the religious extremism is dividing us, and we need to work on it, having our own religion, having our own flags, our own nationality, how we can help each other, how we can live peacefully in our own countries and with our neighbors.
Very well said. Urvashi, I wanted to ask you, there is an aspect of publishing and how Zuban, for example, publish, you publish women's voices with publishing. But how do you find, I mean, within this aspect of the larger aspect of mainstream publishing, how do you find the way to smuggle in peace where, and voices of resistance in trade publishing? What is the space there, and how do you sort of keep it going?
Well, actually, Mandira, there isn't a lot of space there. But like with everything else, you have to make your space, and you have to fight for it. And you asked this question about friendship and about women's friendships, and whether friendships can actually have an influence on the whole question of peace. And in this sense, and I'm going to relate this to the publishing question,
Yeah.
I think in this sense, what's very important is when Khushi and Namrata was speaking, it's important that the whole discussion on South Asia does not become an India-Pakistan centric
Yeah.
one, although the two countries dominate it so much. And therefore, for us in India, especially, and I'm talking specifically about women, it's very important to always be aware of the dominance that we carry, both in terms of history, numbers, the whole works. And it's not as if there haven't been tensions in relationships between our countries. Namrata pointed to how the Nepal-India equation has deteriorated. With Bangladesh, the initial friendship, and then there have been tensions there too. And also with Sri Lanka, we don't have somebody from Sri Lanka here. But women's friendships have crossed those borders and have kept alive the discussion on peace in very interesting ways. So we learned in India a great deal from women in Sri Lanka about the possibility of not giving in to the nationalist divisive rhetoric, and because it's very persuasive, sometimes very easy to adopt that position and say, oh, ho, and especially on, say, something like Kashmir in the past, Indian and Pakistani women would have very different positions. So not to give in to that, but to look at the solidarities that can be built across and despite that. So Sinhala and Muslim women, or Sinhala and Tamil women in Sri Lanka, the ways in which they supported each other despite the divisions that were right up there in the war that was going on, was a very important lesson for us in India on, how much we could work together across communities. So I'm talking now of divisions inside countries. So in a sense, the friendships enable us to talk across those power equations. They enable us to be sensitive to each other's histories and the fact that there is a big brother or a big sister or whatever. They don't necessarily make a huge dent in the larger dialogue. I think that is important to acknowledge because the larger geopolitical dialogue, they're not that interested in women's voices. But if you do have women in power, there is a possibility that some of those messages can be carried through. And one of the Sapan members, for example, Khawar Mumtaz, was at one time head of the Women's Commission in Pakistan. And there was a way in which everyone was communicating and possibly some messages could be carried through. So I think we have to work with what we have and recognize that our limitations are immense, but the potential is also there. And I will, because you asked me about publishing, I'll quickly just mention that in the books that we publish, we do a lot of cross-border publishing. We have worked with Khushi, we have worked with Aino Salish Kendra in Bangladesh, we have worked with other writers there, Shaheen Akhtar, so many other writers whose works we published. And we try to publish also with Pakistan, also with Sri Lanka and Nepal, try to publish in ways that don't repeat the patterns of power. So for example, a recent book that we published by a Pakistani writer on feminisms of young women's feminism is called The Feminisms of Our Mothers. She asked us, she wanted a local edition in Pakistan, and we said, yes, it should be there because we can't reach it there. And so we gave those rights to a publisher there who did the local edition, and we did our own edition. And that works very well because the book is available there, it is available here. So sometimes translations work. We have worked with groups in Bangladesh and in Sri Lanka and Nepal, and those books have been translated into the different languages also. So in a sense, you can always find ways, and it's not about money, but it's about building solidarities, as you said. And I think that helps.
And I think in some ways, independent publishing and independent feminist publishing is really very much testimony to the solidarity and friendships across borders. It really has been built on a sisterhood. And it's amazing that it keeps alive the idea of a different, fairer, peaceful world and, of sisterhood within that whole aspect. And I wanted to talk to Khushi really about the sisterhood that she did, Sangat, as well as the aspect of friendship that has sustained, the movement that she really has worked with, and how do these friendships then really translate, and how does reaching out, and how does that work in terms of building peace as well as finding a way to comfort through friendship and especially with women's movements across the borders. Khushi?
By the way, before Khushi speaks, I should tell you that Khushi and I are very old friends.
I know. I like the fact that everybody is friends, and I think I remember. And I wanted to bring this up because Khushi and we met through Sapan, right? And we finally physically met each other only last year in December, and it never really felt as if I was not Khushi's friend. I couldn't imagine a world before COVID and this conversation, and before Khushi really in some ways. And I wanted to, I think there is this aspect of these friendships that transcended boundaries before the time that we could sit together like this and have this conversation, and Khushi and of course even publishing has managed to make way for solidarity without the help of technology, which is why it's so important. And I was hoping that Khushi would talk about her friendships across the borders, whether it is with India, whether it is with Pakistan, whether it is with Nepal, and how do you keep it alive? Unmute.
There are two different things. One is the friendships and the way that both Rakshanda was talking, Urvashi was talking, Namrata gave a largest picture. There are insidious ways that we manage to weave our way through and create an alternative where we sound out and we make our noises and we create an alternative which shows that we can. But the major dominant factor is when politics start using either extreme nationalism or religion, and using religion as a way of creating divisiveness and divide and hatred. I mean, now I think Pakistan is not so much in the minds of the people of Bangladesh. It's more India, as when you have a large state which is so overbearing and overpowering both. There is no one likes an unequal relationship. So that in that scenario, and where within each country to try and keep their own, I mean, Nepal is something we all can learn from, because they had a movement and then they came to this situation. But what is happening in the rest of us is the extreme nationalism is being fanned in a way, even within the country. So the othering is the only way you do of trying to keep yourselves in position. And that positioning is trying to infiltrate into all layers and all strata. I think what we have been able to do with our friendships, and I have really strong friendships in all, I'll say 5 or 6 countries. Even in Afghanistan, I have a couple of very close friends. But basically in the 5 countries, in the Nepal, India, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan, I have very, very, very close friends. Friends I feel that are really close to me. For instance, I can come to Delhi and just tell Urvashi, I want to stay over at your place. And I feel I have the right to be able to just ask Urvashi to say that I want to stay over at your place. So that is something that we have built up. But what we have also built up while we are doing this is learning about each other. These friendships teach us to open up. I'll give you an example. Because Islam is 90%, 91% of the population of Bangladesh now, currently. We were less before, but we are moving to more and more majoritarianism. So the new concept of trying to promote Islam is this pan-Islamic, coming from Saudi Arabia, code of dressing, etc. So from someone like me who fought against this in the Pakistan era and have strongly and entrenched in secularism of all kinds and firmly believe in that religion is private, if it you want to believe it's your personal affair. It's nothing to do to bring to, it's not, definitely not the state, but it's also not something that you bring into the public sphere. You don't want to create the othering. Now, in good friends in Sri Lanka, who, because they are being attacked so much, feel that they have to wear the hijab for their own, for themselves, for their identity, like I wear the bindi or the bindi, is something I've learned to come closer to and understand. Because before I would reject anyone with a hijab automatically. But I think these friendships have made me come much closer and understand why so-and-so, who is so secular otherwise, wears the hijab because of this. This is the situation. I think we begin to open our minds and understand what is happening. I think what is happening in Palestine, and especially in Gaza now, has made us all, realize that we are not getting upset with a Muslim identity or a Muslim country taking a position against Israel and the hegemony and the barbaric assault that Israel is doing. We come to terms with that. I think this friendship that you say that I have with people across different borders is so important. And I think even if it's a small drop, but from us, it can emanate to other people, the people I work with, for instance. When there have been, I'll give an example, when the Babri Masjid was demolished in Ayodhya, there was an attempt of trying to attack temples in Dhaka. It was very short-lived, very small, and it didn't flare up. It was controlled immediately. But immediately after that, there was a meeting that we had because it was Ruqya Sakhawat Hussein's birth anniversary. I think the Babri Masjid demolition happened in December. I don't remember. Urvashi, you're muted.
92, I think. Yeah.
92, but which date? It was early December.
December 6th.
Yeah, and 9th, we went to a different part of Bangladesh, a remote corner, where Ruqya Sakhawat was born. And there, I think there was this friend that some of us know, Urvashi definitely knows, Hamida Hussain. She went with me and she said, Khushi, to see women with the shidur and the shakha, and Muslim women with their head covered, all coming together for the same program. It's so beautiful to see, because in Dhaka, there has been this tension. You wouldn't feel the tension here. So I think it is possible that when we get together, we do spread this. And we spread this, it becomes positive. Positivity is as catching, is as powerful as negativity is sometimes used as being powerful. I think it's very important that we not give up, that don't think that we are just because we are small in numbers. We do have an outreach. And even if that outreach is not the majority of the population, it makes an impact. It makes a difference. It changes people's way of looking at things. Many things have changed my way of looking at things. I remember the first time it was someone, Nigat Saeed Khan, who took me to Pakistan. And she said, I'll take you to Pakistan. And the workshop she had was in Bhidsha. And I had vowed I wouldn't go to Pakistan. But when I went to Bhidsha, it was a beautiful feeling. And I think no better place to come to terms than being at Bhidsha. And the same thing, I think, happens across. Across, we are, at this moment, we are feeling very worried and very insecure with what is going to happen in India and what's happening in India, because it would have its repercussions on the rest of us, in the rest of the South Asia. So even then, I think the friendships we have with people across all these countries is what keeps us going. And it is what should keep us going. We reach out and help each other, no matter where we stand politically. Actually, we all stand basically the same way politically because we all believe in pluralism. We believe in democracy. We believe in having, inclusivity. So those are things we believe in. We may have different political parties or ideologies that we may agree on or not. But basically, if humanity takes the core position in your psyche and your being, your friendships really help you to bring that together. I think all my friendships, I have, as I said, I have such good friends in Pakistan. I have such good friends in Nepal, such good friends in India, and I've got such good friends in Sri Lanka. And I know when someone is in trouble, I reach out, and they have helped out. I have just reached out and said, so-and-so is in trouble in your country over here. And they've reached out and they've been able to help out. And this is something that I think this is something special that as women bonding together, we can do that.
Yeah.
You know, it's needed. I think we just need to continue to build this up and continue to not give up, continue to bridge this as much as we can. And I truly believe if we are 1/4 of the world's population, or a little more than 1/4, a quarter of the world's population. If we are a quarter of the world's population and if we could be together, if we can be a much stronger unity together, keeping our differences, keeping our different cultures, our languages and everything, whatever it is. Our differences are there, but our differences are not there to divide us. If we can accept this and come together, what a powerful South Asia we would be, what a powerful part of the world we would be, what a much better world we would be, how much more we would have been able to do. I just want to add one thing, when you have laws or rules, like in Bangladesh, we celebrate the Buddha Purnima is a national holiday, Janmashtami and Durga Puja is national holiday, Easter and Christmas are national holidays. So all these are national holidays, but that doesn't mean we are secular because our minds are not. So we have to spread this, what we have built amongst ourselves and what we are talking and what Sapan is about also. Yeah. I mean, I'm with Sangat. Sangat is definitely a very strong feminist network. But what Urvashi is not part of Sangha, but Urvashi and me are really very close friends from many years back. Yeah. And I feel that I can depend on her for many things. So these friendships that we have across borders are so important that we need to build this up and continue. And that's the only way. And now with because of pandemic, we started using the social media, Zoom and kind of discussions we are having. What amazing discussions we've had. Yeah. And how much we've learned from each other about many things.
Yeah. So I want to bring Namrata in because she does the Sapan News. And I wanted to ask her for a quick question on how do you think Sapan News, which looks at South Asia through a South Asian lens, where it's not only India, Pakistan, and you talk about the holistic idea of South Asia, do you think that's the way forward? Unmute.
Yeah. I had muted, so I didn't want to disturb the other speakers.
Yeah.
Then it forgets. No, I think Sapan News is a brilliant step forward in bringing issues of South Asia and not just India and Pakistan. And actually, but somehow there seems to be this domination of India, Pakistan, in everything when we do South Asian activities. But I feel that we need to move out of it. And as more and more participants from different other countries, and the thing is, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh have been there with their histories, with their political uprisings, educational level higher than other countries like Nepal, Bhutan, and all that. So somehow dominance seems to happen, But I think what Sapan in general and Sapan News also has been trying to do is, come out of that. And I think we've been doing that because, when I first joined Sapan, the first Sapan conference webinar that I moderated was actually on Sri Lanka, So, and a Nepali moderating a conference in Sri Lanka. So then after that, a series of other things. Then what Sapan News does is all the activities that Sapan itself is doing as webinars, which are very much focused on South Asia in a really true South Asian manner. And also stories from individual countries and the region, country-wise, and also people from South Asian countries being affected all over the world. Because Sapan has voice from South Asians globally, and Sapan News tries to bring out that voice, and the voice is definitely has a message of peace. So for recently, the World Social Forum happened in Kathmandu, and luckily we have Sapan doesn't have money to bring people around, the members, but we luckily happened to have a group of Sapaniers in Kathmandu, and we were involved in different panels, So there was a story on South Asia on that, so that was coming out. So it was not just one country or the other. So I think Sapan News does it. Mandira, I also wanted to just quickly answer a little bit more on how, like media can actually give space, and with example. Like, for example, after Nepal became, democracy was restored in the country in 1990, one of the biggest achievements that has happened is the women's movement. The feminist movement has come up very strongly in this country. And there, there has been a lot of support, especially from women's organization in South Asia. You see? So many of us actually have studied in India. I have a very a deep passion and feeling of home for India because I studied there, I worked there. I actually worked in Ahmedabad with Ila Bhat, So
Wow.
that's I mean, the passion I got from the Gandhian movement, which I was already a fan of from Nepal. And then I made lots of friends with powerful women in Ahmedabad. Actually, one is coming with a family in May to spend a month with me. And when I had to take my father to be for a treatment of cancer in Delhi, actually, a friend, she just didn't listen to anything, and she made me stay there for 2 weeks and help me deal with my father, who is a personality in himself. She actually dealt with him, that you have to do the thing. So that kind of friendship is there. Then many of us have studied in Bangladesh, in Pakistan also, and different professions. So one of the first things after the restoration of democracy was the property rights. And we changed, girls did not have right to ancestral property. So that was the big movement that the feminist world took. And lessons were learned from India, Bangladesh, Pakistan. When the laws were being drafted, friends from here took help from friends across the borders. And what media did is, media had this agenda in the forefront. So when in homes, families were saying, oh, women now need property rights over their property, they're talking in that way. Media actually helped to write about why women needed property rights and how it would actually benefit the country. So what I feel is, in the peace language that we have to use, especially as journalists, we have to find ways of giving spaces and prominent spaces in the media where we can talk about, if we are talking about challenging rights of people who are not getting rights otherwise, people who are being marginalized. Why is it that is needed? It's because of the human rights, and whose benefit is it? It's the benefit of the humanity. You see?
Yeah.
So, and then, so media has been giving space for women's voice, but on the other hand, positivity doesn't get space in the front page to spread the positive stories, so, and especially now with the virtual media and the
Yeah.
social media that has come up, it's become more tricky. Why also I feel is the younger generation again has a sense of freedom and a sense of raising their voice for rights in a different way than
Yeah.
our generation did. You see, so
Yeah.
there's a gap over there. But on the other hand, what I feel is, especially for one more thing I wanted to share is in Nepal, although it's a small country as compared to our other nations,
Mhm.
especially the three countries around us, there has been some very positive steps that has happened after the restoration of democracy and establishment of Federal Republic Nepal. Things like the constitution guaranteeing and acknowledging that there are men, women, and other categories, where
Yes.
the sexual minority is given. So when you land in Nepal airport now, Kathmandu airport, when you fill the form for your visas, there's male, female, and other, and that is
Yeah.
in all the forms. There's also same-sex marriage now. So gay
Yeah.
rights was accepted earlier. I think first in Nepal,
First
even
country.
before
Yeah.
India, although the movement was there. So there are positive things that can be learned, but even for us to get that, actually, we got a lot of support from the movements that were already happening in other South Asian countries, you see. So that is there. And I just wanted to share that when rights have to be established, that is the path to peace, right?
Yeah.
And that path to peace has to be carried by media. And what I do is, as a reporter, you report factual things, and you try to get uh, the importance of the people in the front page and all that.
Yeah.
But I also now write, I do reporting as a freelancer, but I also have a column. So what happens is, in the column you can actually give your opinion also,
Yeah. So that
so
makes it
that
good.
way also I think that is also one forum where peace and the kind of peace that we are talking about, the friendships within the country, no matter animosity with the politician, that will not go over the
Yeah.
overnight. But
Yeah.
when I listen to the dialogue that happens in the Sapan network and the news that we carry in Sapan news, I see that there are lots of people who think like us.
Yeah.
Somebody just said, like things have to be internalized. Just having, like Khushi, I think, said,
Yeah.
just having holidays to, celebrate all the different religion is not enough. You need to internalize.
Internalize it. Yeah.
Women's movements need to be internalized. Inclusion just is not enough. Like
Yeah.
Nepal now has two systems in the elections, right? First past the post and
Yeah.
proportional representation. So the proportional representation is actually to give space for the gender, men, women, or those who are put in the other category,
Yeah.
space if they don't get it through the first past the post, not for wives and families of big politicians. You see, but that is what is happening. But still, at least there is a provision there. So I think what Sapan News now needs to focus on is how to also carry stories and positive stories which will help people to internalize the issues of peace
Next
that we
step. Yes. The next step forward. So I'm giving up everybody 1 minute, one closing this thing. Is there room for hope? And what do you think hope represents? One word each. Rakshanda ji, aapse pehle. First, yours. Hope. Is there a future for hope? Peace. And what is your hope?
I believe because the way people are connecting with each other and talking and opening their hearts, this is I believe there is a hope.
Thank you. Urvashi?
Mandira, there's always room for hope. Otherwise, where would we be without hope? And look at what you're doing right now. You're coordinating a panel of women from South Asia for a women's festival that is based in Dubai and that goes online. And it is for a South Asian Peace Network that covers all kinds of places in the world. What's that if not hope?
That's beautifully put. Khushi, friendship and hope. Unmute.
Friendship and hope is what keeps us going. I mean, I wouldn't be where I am if I never had hope. And I have hope. We all have hope. I think what we're all doing, Urvashi said it beautifully.
Yeah,
and what
she
we
did.
will continue to do, not just this session, but what we'll be doing in future too, is going to just keep growing stronger. And I believe so strongly in it that it is totally within me. And I think that keeps me going all the time. People just keep saying that, how do you keep on fighting? And because I have hope, I believe in people.
Namrata, waging war for peace. What's hope?
Now I'm unmuted. There's always hope. I'm a very, very optimistic person, and I believe that there is always hope, especially for peace. And, you know, the fact that I can actually reach friends in any of the South Asian country whenever I need. And one of my WhatsApp group is a bunch of women in different parts of India. We are almost every day in communication, you know. So they give hope to me, I give hope to them. And I'm sure there's a future with all of us together.
Thank you so much. And it's a wrap.